Today, oil prices rising on high demand and low supply. And OPEC Plus countries canceling crisis talks because they can't agree on what to do. What could happen next? And the Pentagon pulling the plug on its $10 billion cloud computing contract. Amazon and Microsoft are disappointed, but ready for the next opportunity. And fast food chains are losing workers at a record pace. Which chains are holding on to people and which ones aren't? That and much more, coming up at NTD Business. Good evening and great to have you with us. I'm Paul Graney. Oil prices are still rising today on high demand and low supply. But there could be some respite. The oil cartel OPEC Plus can't reach an agreement to hold production at these artificially low levels. Some countries apparently want to increase production to take advantage of the high prices. This could be good news for businesses and consumers if it happens. Here's the details.
Oil prices jumped to a 6-year high on Monday.
A lot of it is due to the fact that demand for refined products, gasoline, diesel, and to a lesser extent jet fuel, has recovered probably a little bit faster than everyone had anticipated.
And then on top of that, a deal to gradually increase production fell apart. The United Arab Emirates blocked it. Now, OPEC crisis talks were abandoned on Monday, and so far there's no new date to resume the talk. This leaves the oil market facing tight supply and rising prices. Chief oil analyst Denton Sincagrano says the falling out is because the UAE is now trying to compete with larger producers. They've invested a large amount in order to produce more oil.
I think because they've invested so much, they want to sort of reap some of those benefits at these higher prices.
In principle, the countries did agree on an increase of 400,000 barrels a day starting August to December this year. Sincagrana says once the talks resume, he sees 3 different possibilities on how it can play out.
So we could wait and kind of tackle this over the next several months and come to an agreement and just continue on with our 400,000 barrel a day increase now through the end of the year. Or they could say, look, no increases. We're going to hold the line right here. We're going to keep our quotas intact.
But that would push prices even higher. He says the third, but unlikely possibility is a price war. He also says ideally he'd like to see the first scenario play out. And while some are worried whether this could be the end of OPEC, Sincagrana is not.
The kind of OPEC obituary has been written many times over the years, and they always find a way to recover.
He says they'll always find a way to put their differences behind them and the cooler heads prevail. Don Ma, NTD News.
And the Pentagon has canceled its $10 billion cloud computing contract, which was meant to modernize its operations. Amazon and Microsoft were fighting over the deal. Now the agency says it'll launch a new contract and both tech companies will get another chance. NTD's Kevin Hogan has the details.
Amazon and Microsoft were in a legal battle over the Pentagon's JEDI, or Joint Enterprise Defense Infrastructure deal. The payout would have been $10 billion. It's a cloud computing project. And the Pentagon says that partly due to new needs and advances in the industry, the contract no longer serves its purpose. But the Pentagon said it still needs cloud computing services and announced its new Joint Warfighter Cloud Capability contract. Amazon and Microsoft are expected to have the chance at submitting proposals for the new contract. That's because the agency says the 2 companies are the only ones that can handle the job. The Defense Department will also do market research to see if any other U.S.-based cloud service provider can meet its needs. If so, it will negotiate with those companies as well. The move is seen as a win for Amazon. That's because Amazon brought up legal challenges to the Pentagon's decision to award Microsoft a $1 million contract originally. Microsoft posted a response on its blog. It said the DoD was faced with the tough choice of either continuing with a legal battle that could last a year or finding another path forward. The company said it respects the DoD's decision. Amazon did not immediately provide NTD with a response to the move. After the news came out, Microsoft's stock dipped about 0.5%, while Amazon's increased 3.5%. What's more, Amazon stock had just reached a 52-week high. The new contract is expected to be awarded next spring, and bidders identified by October. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos are backing a fake meat startup that uses fungus as the main ingredient. It's already raised over $150 million, suggesting fake meat is a growing industry. NTD's Colin Fredrickson has the details.
Meat made from fungus is hitting grocery shelves later this year. The startup Nature's Find has raised $158 million, with Bill Gates as one of the backers.
This company, Nature's Find, is using fungi, and then they turn them into sausage and yogurt. Pretty amazing.
The company's founders discovered the fungus, called Fusarium strain flavolapis, back at Yellowstone National Park before 2012. They were conducting research for NASA on extreme forms of life.
And that's how we started and how we discovered a completely new, naturally occurring protein form that had been living there for thousands of years. That's why we call ourselves Nature's Find, found in nature.
This comes as the alternative foods industry grew in 2020. The Plant-Based Foods Association says plant-based food sales went up 27% in 2020, sending the market value to $7 billion.
Especially in the developing world, there's projected to be very large increases in demand there, and we can either address that using traditional approaches, or we can address it using more efficient and sustainable approaches, and that can include these alternative meats.
Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods, which uses GMOs, currently dominate the industry. Other big meat producers, such as Tyson, Perdue, Cargill, and Hormel, are following in their footsteps. Colin Fredrickson, NTD News.
Did you know workers are leaving the restaurant industry faster than any time before? UBS did a deep dive into which chains are holding on to people better than others. Here's NTD's Phil Zhou with the details.
UBS says restaurant chains like Chipotle, Dunkin, and Sonic have some of the lowest employee satisfaction levels. Fast food workers are quitting at a record pace. Analysts at the global bank use employee reviews and salary benefits info to determine the rankings, looking at 5 categories including pizza, fast casual, and coffee. Starbucks and Texas Roadhouse are some chains that scored the highest in employee satisfaction. Jack in the Box and Taco Bell improved the most in employee satisfaction. UBS says restaurant worker satisfaction is actually higher than before the pandemic. Then why are workers still quitting? Gordon Haskett research advisors say the workers are trying to get another job that pays more. In April, around 5% of food service workers voluntarily quit their jobs. That's double the quitting rate for the whole economy. Restaurants continue to struggle hiring workers as the economy reopens. Many businesses have resorted to raising wages, offering bonuses, and even paying people cash just to come in for an interview. Phil Zhou, NTD News.
Stocks are mostly lower today, with the S&P 500 posting its first decline after 7 straight gains. The Dow fell 209 points, or 0.6%. S&P 500 lost 9 points, or about 0.2%. Nasdaq added 24 points, or less than 0.2% today. And social network Nextdoor is about to go public at a valuation of $4.3 billion. It says it'll merge with a shell company for the deal, SPAC listing. Nextdoor is backed by investment firm Tiger Global. It was launched in the U.S. in 2011, and through its app, users can get advice from their neighbors on anything from babysitters to organizing local sports clubs. Nextdoor says its platform is used in more than 275,000 neighborhoods around the world, about nearly 1 in 3 U.S. households. The merger is expected to close in the fourth quarter this year. So maybe you've been saving money this year, you're ready to travel again, but beware, it could be more expensive this year. Hotel rooms cost 44% more, airfares were 24% higher in May. The most drastic price hike, rental car prices up 110% from a year ago. Of course, experts say that's not exactly a fair comparison, since at this time last year we were in the height of the pandemic. Instead, they say you should look at 2019's prices, which are more or less the same. And that's true if you average it out, but there are still huge disparities in prices depending on where you're going. Destinations that rely heavily on business travel, like New York or Washington, D.C., they're still seeing prices below 2019 levels. But vacation destinations, places like Florida, have seen prices surge almost 50% from where they were 2 years ago. It looks like grocery stores expect prices to keep rising too. The Wall Street Journal reports that supermarkets are stocking up at today's prices so they can get a better margin in the future, even if prices do go up. Ask Professor Michael Bustler at Stockton University if there's any reason we should think prices won't continue to rise.
So it depends who you believe. So if you go along with what the Biden administration, the Federal Reserve says, they say this inflation will subside in the next month or two. If you believe that and you see higher prices, you may want to say, well, let me not pay the higher price because it should stabilize within the next few months. If, on the other hand, you believe other economists who say that there are other reasons for inflation, and you start to believe that, then you're going to get into the psychology where you're willing to pay the higher prices.
Do you fear that the government, if it continues to get worse, we might see price controls of goods like we saw in the past?
I don't think so. Price controls seldom work. Back in the 70s, Nixon said, look, inflation is getting bad. I'm just going to pass a law and nobody can raise their price for 3 months. So nobody raised it for 3 months. The problem was at the end of the 3 months, they raised the price to make up for what they were short in the last 3 months, and it ended up not working. So I don't think that'll happen. What we need to see is for the Federal Reserve to do exactly what they did in 2016 to 2018. There were some early signs of inflation. So the Federal Reserve said, I'm going to gradually nudge interest rates up. We took them up 1/4 of a point. We did it 8 times over a 2-year period. That was enough to take excess demand out of the economy to reduce inflation, but not enough to take too much demand out of the economy that it slowed things down. So the Federal Reserve, in my view, should start gradually raising interest rates now, and they should also stop flooding the market with money by increasing the money supply.
Because some people argue, of course, that if interest rates are raised and the Fed tapers too quickly, it will impact the economy. Some people say it will have very, disastrous effects in the economy. Are these overblown, these fears?
Yeah. So what they're saying is if the Federal Reserve takes demand out of the economy at the time when the economy is recovering, isn't that going to slow the recovery and maybe worse? I don't think so now because there's so much excess demand in the economy. That if the Federal Reserve takes those gradual steps, not raising it a couple of percent overnight, but 1/4 of a point every 3 months, as they did back in 2016 to 2018, I think they'll be able to take enough demand out to keep the inflation rate down without hurting economic growth. Remember, the growth rate for the second quarter is likely to be in the 9% range. That means for the last 12 months, the economy has grown at about 12% in the last 12 months. That's very rapid growth. So now we're worried about inflation. So just gradually start to take some of the demand out. Watch the numbers. If you think you took a little too much demand out, stop. If you're taking the demand out and inflation is going down, but the economy is still growing, then continue on the policy. This is the first time I can remember since Paul Volcker in 1980 that the Federal Reserve was not ahead of inflation. Whenever there's a sign of inflation, they usually take action ahead of it. Now we're behind the inflation, and I think the longer the Fed waits to take action, the more drastic the action will have to be.
Professor Michael Busler, Stockton University. And America's service sector continued to show solid growth in June, though at a slightly slower rate than May's record-setting expansion. The Institute for Supply Management said Tuesday that its monthly service industry index came in at 60.1 in June after an all-time high reading of 64 in May. Any reading above 50 suggests the sector is experiencing growth. In June's reading was the 13th straight month of service sector expansion after a 2-month contraction in April and May of last year due to pandemic shutdowns. At the same time, though, the group's business employment index fell into contraction territory in June with a reading of 49.3. That dip below 50 suggests many companies are still struggling to hire workers. And severe droughts are squeezing farmers and families along the Oregon-California border. They usually water their lands via an artificial river basin, but since water levels are so low right now, authorities won't allow it. They say suckerfish, coveted by a local Native American tribe, would be put at risk. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
This summer, a historic drought is dividing the communities dependent on the waters of the Klamath River. Ben Duval's family has farmed this land for 3 generations. For the first time, he and hundreds of others aren't getting any water at all.
Everybody depends on the water of the Klamath River for their livelihood. And that's the blood that ties us all together.
Some affected farmers say a guarantee of at least some water each year would be better than nothing. Some worry the problems in the basin are getting blamed on a way of life they inherited. Duval's daughter dreams of taking over the family farm someday, but he isn't sure he and his wife, Erica, can hang on to the land if things don't change.
Constant looming threat over me that, am I going to be the generation that ends up losing the family farm because of situation that's beyond my control?
The farmers rely on a federally managed dam on Upper Klamath Lake for their water. But the lake is also home to endangered suckerfish, and the federal government must keep the lake at a minimum depth to support the fish. Water is always in short supply. But this year, there wasn't enough to ensure those levels and supply farmers. The Native American Klamath tribes consider the fish species critical to their culture and heritage. They've fought to preserve it and keep lake levels up.
Archaeological evidence has us here for 14,000 years. But our worldview and our traditional worldview is everything that was placed here for a purpose, including us. And those fish that were created for us were to provide for our subsistence.
Meanwhile, toxic algae is blooming in the river basin's main lake, and 2 national wildlife refuges for migratory birds are dying out. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
And Chinese ride-hailing app Didi's shares tanked over 20% today, wiping billions of dollars of its valuation. Shares are now at about $12 a share, well below its debut price. Chinese regulators ordered the app be taken down and are now investigating it over data protection issues. Wall Street Journal reports regulators warned the company to delay the initial public offering, but Didi says it has no knowledge of the investigation before the IPO. And in the middle of a global chip shortage, the UK government has let a Chinese-owned company buy the UK's largest chip producer. Acquisition was announced yesterday. NTD's Patrick Hayden in London has the story.
A Chinese-owned firm called Nextdoor has acquired the UK's largest semiconductor producer. Currently, there's a global shortage of chips, and some say the deal has national security implications.
Well, if this deal was to have taken place in the United States, there's absolutely no doubt that it would have been hauled up before CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment.
In April, the UK government introduced the National Security and Investment Act, which includes preventing key assets from being taken over by foreign powers.
The UK was meant to have powers that were equivalent, if not tougher, but Kwasi Kwarteng, the business secretary, has inexplicably decided not to act.
The UK Business Secretary says the government is monitoring but doesn't want to intervene at the moment.
And I think this is a real test moment for the UK's powers. If the business secretary doesn't act here in a case in which national security concerns are perhaps clearer than any other that I could imagine, many people will feel that the UK's powers are all bark and no bite.
Armstrong says most company valuations globally have been decimated, with the exception of China.
China, the country that has an awful lot to answer for in the spread of the disease, is seeming to be the economic beneficiary of it.
CNBC sources say the deal is worth $87 million. If so, that seems cheap, as large semiconductor foundries tend to cost closer to the $1 billion and upward mark. Patrick Hayden, NTD News, London.
Still to come this evening. Airlines are waiving change fees for flights to some Florida cities as tropical storm Esla moves closer. Which cities are on the list? And French champagne makers are speaking out against a new Russian law affecting champagne exports to Russia. One industry group is now trying to stop shipments. That and more after this short break.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. Over the last 12 years, you've helped MyPillow create thousands of jobs right here in the USA.
When I got MyPillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
That's why I invented My Pillow. My patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs and helps keep your neck supported and aligned. I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled My Pillow, and to thank you for your support, I'm going to pass the savings directly on to you. For example, you get my 6-piece towel sets, regular $109.99, now only $44.98, or My Pillow dog beds for as low as $19.99 with your promo code.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit mypillow.com.
Hi folks, Joe Namath here, and if you're on Medicare, this is important. You're now entitled to eliminate copays and get dental care, dentures, eyeglasses, prescription coverage, in-home aids, unlimited transportation, and home-delivered meals, all at no additional cost. Plus, your zip code may have coverage with the Give Back benefit that adds money back to your Social Security check every month.
I called to get dental, transportation, meals, and the Give Back benefit.
With this virus situation, I called to get everything I'm entitled to. I couldn't believe I was missing out on so many benefits.
With the uncertainty of the virus, you need to get everything you're entitled to. Millions of people have trusted the Medicare Coverage Helpline. You can too. Call now. It's free.
Call 1-800-764-1930. That's 1-800-764-1930 now.
Welcome back. Airlines are relaxing ticket change policies for customers traveling through several Florida cities this week because of Tropical Storm Elsa. High winds and heavy rains are expected in the western part of the state through Wednesday. American Airlines is waiving change fees for flights headed to Tampa, Key West, Fort Myers, and Sarasota, but customers have to pick another flight no later than July 12th. Delta has a similar deal, but passengers need to fly by July 10th. United Airlines waiver also includes Miami, Orlando, West Palm Beach, and Fort Lauderdale. And Costco members who are at least 60 years old or disabled have less than a month left to take advantage of special shopping hours. The wholesale club is dropping special pandemic shopping times. At most locations, only members who are seniors, disabled, or immunocompromised are allowed to shop between 9 and 10 a.m. on weekdays. Costco implemented special shopping hours 16 months ago, and many other retailers set aside similar times for customers considered more vulnerable to infection. Senior hours are starting to fade away, though, with Trader Joe's recently cutting them at most stores. Costco is expected to resume normal operations with no senior hours by July 26th. Walmart and Target still have senior hours listed on their website. And on Monday, France's champagne industry group blasted a new Russian law. The law forces champagne producers to add a sparkling wine reference to their bottles, in addition to the word champagne. Now the group is pushing to halt exports of beverage to Russia. Chris Dingham with more.
Tensions between Moscow and French winemakers bubbled over on Monday when France's champagne industry group called on its members to halt all shipments of the fizzy beverage to Russia over a new law signed by Russian President Vladimir Putin that forces foreign champagne producers to add the words sparkling wine to their labels. The law requires all non-Russian producers of sparkling wine to describe their product as such on the back of every bottle, but Russian makers of Champanskoye may continue to use that term alone. In response, France's Champagne Wine Professionals Committee said all shipments to Russia should be halted for the time being, and said the name champagne, which refers to the region in France the drink comes from, had legal protection in 120 countries.
It's tragic for the producers who are losing the legitimate right to use this name. It's also tragic for our business with Russia because, at least temporarily, champagne wines will no longer be able to be exported to Russia because they no longer conform with the rules.
The Champagne Committee also called on French and European Union diplomats to get the law changed. Meanwhile, Moet Hennessy, the maker of Dom Perignon, said it would comply with the law and begin adding the word sparkling wine to the back of bottles destined for Russia.
And an autonomous shuttle bus powered by hydrogen is the first vehicle of its kind, according to developers. It started driving on the roads of Estonia's university town yesterday, and NTD's Andrew Thomas has the details.
Estonian President Kersti Kaljulaid unveiled a new autonomous shuttle bus powered by hydrogen Monday, before stepping inside to take it for a ride. The vehicle features low-temperature hydrogen fuel cells developed by the University of Tartu, combined with self-driving tech from Estonian autonomous vehicle company OPEC. With 6 seats, the vehicle is intended to help passengers cover the final stretch of longer journeys. OPEC CEO Johannes Masov said the company already had self-driving vehicles with lithium-ion batteries, but there were still some issues with energy usage.
We have seen that thanks to a really big energy consumption in the heating and air conditioning system, we needed some separate system for the vehicle. And hydrogen has been a really good possibility for that.
Raiz Konarbeck from the university's chemistry department said the vehicle could be fully charged in a matter of minutes.
Filling this vehicle takes only 2 minutes. I measured it. That means after 2 minutes of refilling, it can drive 6 to 7 hours. That means you don't have to have so many vehicles on a line to operate.
The vehicle has been approved by the Estonian Road Administration, and it will operate in Tartu in a pilot program to gather data about how it can be best used. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
As the latest business updates for today, you can still catch NTD Evening News, though. That's with Stephanie Cox at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. For NTD Business, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.